Hi everyone, and welcome to the Say As It Is with Pete podcast series. I'm Pete, your host, and each week I will bring you some frank and honest conversations covering various topics from learning and development, apprenticeships, funding, HR, strengths, recruitment, ESG, well-being, ED&I, employability, and much, much more. So let's get this week's episode underway and say as it is. Hi everybody, and welcome to this episode of Say As It Is with Pete. And as always, I'm your host, Pete. As we have some frank and honest and open conversations around different topics that people have either messaged me and asked to have a conversation around, or I've just wanted to talk about it. So this week's episode, I am going to be focusing on something that comes up within apprenticeships. And yes, you probably think, Pete, you do so many podcasts on apprenticeships. Well, yeah, I do. But this one has been bugging me for a while, and I've mentioned a couple of times that we'll get this podcast out. Haven't really got around to it, but I think now is the key time to do it. So this episode is to focus on something called off-the-job hours. Now, this is something that has bugged me within the apprenticeship world since it came out, and it's bugged a lot of employers. And there's a lot been since. I'll tell you what, since 2017, when the standards changed and off-the-job hours came into effect, it has been a little bit of a nightmare for everybody. And in this episode, I plan to explore that a little bit more. Yes, the nightmare, as it's always good to talk out your nightmares, right? But also to give you some information on kind of how I see off-the-job hours as an employer and as a practitioner in the world of learning and development and apprenticeships, because I think we spend too much time on this word off-the-job hours, and it panics everybody because employers start to think, oh my God, I've got to let them off the job. They'll be taking, 1 day a week out. Who's going to cover their shift? What do we do? And there's been all these kind of nightmarish scenarios and questions, and it's been going around for a long, long time. And recently, the standards, when they or the funding rules for the standards from the ESFA come out, they always have some amendments and adjustments. And for the funding rules for 23-24, and just for a point of reference, funding is academic based, so from the 1st of August to the 31st of July. So we are obviously currently in the 23-24 funding band, because it was from the 1st of August 2023 and goes to the 31st of August 2024, and then from the 31st of July 2024, and then from the 1st of August 2024 to the 31st of July 2025 is the 24-25 funding rules, and there'll be more to come out. But it's always key, and I do say this to anybody that gets involved in apprenticeships or has a dealing with apprenticeships. One of my top tips for you all is read the funding rules. Yes, they are big, they're very wordy, but you must read them. Now, like myself, we have our digital apprenticeship service account where we log in to that for the organisation, and we agree every funding year that we will follow the rules and requirements required of us as an employer to provide apprenticeships and what our commitments are for that aspect. And I think it's key that you keep up to date. So you can go into Google or your internet service provider's browser, so Siri, Fox, or whatever you've got. Type in current ESFA funding rules 23-24, or just current funding rules for apprenticeships. It will take you to the government's website, and you can look at current and past funding rules, and then it will also give you links to things like off-the-job hours and things like that. And it tells you what you can spend your funding on and what you can't. And just a heads up, and I've mentioned this before, every time the funding rules change yearly doesn't mean that the conditions of everybody else's terms of their apprenticeship change. So, for example, what I mean by that is if you are signed up on the 1st of July 2023, you are literally like 30 days until the funding rules change to the 23-24 funding rules from the 1st of August. So it doesn't mean that you sign up under the 22-23 rules, and then from the 1st of August you automatically migrate to the new funding rules, and everything to do with your apprenticeship then relates to the current funding rules. It doesn't. And this is where some people have been caught out in the past. So if you are signed up in a certain funding year, that funding year is relevant to the delivery of your qualification and will always refer to that. So whatever the requirements are, the eligibility, what the funding can be spent on or not, the requirements for on and off the job, whatever it may be, you are covered by that regardless. So even if your apprenticeship doesn't finish until the 30th of December 2024, which should be the 24-25 funding rules, you will still be covered by the 22-23 funding rules. So just be mindful of that. And if you're still a bit confused, then reach out to me and I can have those conversations. But every training provider knows this anyway, and they'll always guide the employer as well. But also, if you're an employer provider, you should know that. And hopefully you do, because there is a mix of providers. So these are direct training providers that deliver apprenticeships, and there are employer providers, and these are employers that have set up their own training provider subsidiary side of the business. I promised myself I'll go for a walk before I recorded this, so I wouldn't be tongue-tied, but I am. But this is the joys of a podcast, right? Tongue-tied words always catches me out. But yes, so you have employer providers. So these providers or employers that are delivering their apprenticeships on their own. And bit of a word for the wise, if you're going to get involved in becoming an employer provider, there's quite a lot that you need to take into consideration. And I would make sure that you are fully prepared. Yes, you can create all the documentations and everything you need, but you need to have the infrastructure to be able to deliver it. So you'll need a proper delivery team, quality team, admin team. You'll need a base of tutors. So you're really setting up your own business on the side. So yes, you'll have your company, but you'll obviously have your apprenticeship provider company. So it's a bit of an entity on its own, and there's some very grey, murky water around becoming an employer provider. And I'm sure I'll do another podcast on it soon. But yes, as I said, top tip: read your funding rules. But what I do is I read the funding rules for everybody. I read the funding rules for the training provider so that I'm up to date and aware of what the training provider has to follow. I also read the employer provider ones just out of interest, and then I also read the employer funding rules, so what our commitment is as an employer to apprenticeships. And I think it's always key to read all three. They're very similar, but it's interesting, and it's good to keep yourself up to date, especially for your CPD. And theoretically, this is what we're going to talk about today. So one of the things or the components of an apprenticeship is something called off-the-job hours. Now, off-the-job hours relates to anything that the apprentice does that is not normally done in their job role, but will also support them in gaining their apprenticeship. So this could be from shadowing somebody in a different department. It could be going on trade shows. It could be going on exhibitions. It could be reading a trade industry magazine or an article. It could be watching a YouTube video, some distance e-learning, going on a training course. It's all going to aim to get them towards learning additional stuff apart from what they would do day to day. So very much of a difference between off the job and on the job. So on the job is what you're learning for your role and that is relevant to you in your job, and the skills and the knowledge, so the knowledge, skills and behaviours that you need to know for your job, that's on the job training. Anything outside of that, something different, is classified as off the job, but it still supports you in aiming towards achieving your apprenticeship. And as I said, this off the job thing has caused problems, and especially when you use the term off the job, because first thing that jumps into your mind, or jumped into my mind initially when it was stated way back in 2017 or 16-17 when it was being reviewed, was that people have to spend time out of work. What employers are going to allow people to take time out of work? Now, some apprenticeships are 4 days in work and 1 day at college, and that counts towards that. But also, you still need to, as an employer, make sure that people are doing that off the job. Now, as the funding rules have changed, as I said, they're now in the 23-24, and the off the job requirement has changed. In some cases, for example, I've seen apprentices having to achieve anything between 500 to 600, maybe to 800 hours of learning of off the job. That's a lot. And that's over the duration of their apprenticeship. Sometimes that's near enough, 6 to 8 hours a week of finding off-the-job activities to do. And I've got some guidance, and I will put a link to it for you to have a look at in what classifies as off-the-job and what you can use it for. But I think as an employer, we need to do our part. So as employers, Yes, you have the providers, and what will happen is the provider will account for a lot of off-the-job hours and kind of activities that will be covered, but kind of the remaining has to be covered by the employer and the individual apprentice. And there's always all that question like, how are we going to do it? What's going to happen? How do we manage this? Apprentices are asking you for off-the-job hours, and you're like, I can't give you time off to do things. This is just ridiculous. This is not acceptable. But guess what, guys? Unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast. And that's what has to be delivered as part of the apprenticeship framework. Now, this is where I like to have these conversations, but put a little bit of a twist on the situation. And I've been having this conversation with some current apprentices within my organisation, where we've had some people come to us and say, oh, can I have 6 hours off a week for my apprenticeship? No. Well, I need to do my 6 hours. Yeah, and there's a way to manage it, and there's a way that we can do it. So as a supportive employer, we make sure that the guys do their off-the-job hours, but we put a different bit of a spin on it. And I know some providers that may listen to this may not be happy, but I do not care. We have to take a different approach, and I feel like I need to lobby the Institute for Apprenticeships and those that came up with this off-the-job hours, especially the ESFA. Now, we put a lot of pressure on apprentices to find these off-the-job hours, and the current requirement now under the 23-24 funding rules is that the employer must allow the apprentice to complete a minimum of 6 hours a week off-the-job learning. Again, the question pops into your mind, is that going to be 6 hours a week I need to give off for that apprentice to do anything? Well, no. If you have something called time management and good organisational skills, that apprentice can fit that into their day-to-day job. And this is what we call organisational skills, being organised. You can put in an hour or two here or there, or you could spend, one day of the week. Somebody could spend 3 hours, 1 day a week doing their apprenticeship, and the other 3 hours can be split between the week. And you can get that 3 hours either in the morning or in the afternoon. You can do it on when there's a busier day, or not necessarily a busy day, but when there's more quiet time during the week. So, for example, if it's a bit more quiet on a Thursday, Friday, you may say to somebody like your apprentice, well, you know what, you can take 3 to 4 hours in the morning or the afternoon. So, before lunch or after lunch, and then you can work on your apprenticeship. And then once you've done that 3 hours, then you crack on with your work for the rest of the day. Or you can split your time 2 hours a day. You could do that. So you could work on it that the person spends 2 hours in the morning or 2 hours in the afternoon working on their apprenticeship. And that's a great way to do it. As long as the job is getting done, that's fine. And the day-to-day job isn't being really affected, but you can give the time to the apprentice to do it. But there's lots of different activities that can be done for apprenticeships. But what I want to do is get away from this title, the off-the-job title. And that's why I want to lobby and get it changed, because off-the-job really means CPD. And if people don't know what CPD is a continuous professional development. And part of the apprenticeship, and this is where I find it funny, part of the apprenticeship, you need to provide a CPD log of everything that you've learned throughout the whole of your apprenticeship. Well, guess what? That CPD log is theoretically your off-the-job log of any additional things that you've learned for your apprenticeship. So I seriously think, training providers, if you're with me on this one, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love you to jump on a conversation, because I did ask a few providers, but nobody would interact for some reason. I don't know why. But if you want to have this conversation, providers, please come to the table. But I do think the off-the-job should be renamed to a CPD log. And the requirement should be a certain number of hours for the apprenticeship, or a certain number of hours a month to be completed. So, for example, if you're looking for 6 hours a week, normal an average month is 4 weeks. So you're looking at a potential 24 hours of off-the-job learning a month, or 30 hours a month. You could go 30 hours a month, but on average about 24 that you're looking for. Yeah. So with the funding rules at the moment, you're probably looking at about 290 to 300 hours of off-the-job learning. So let's scrap the word off-the-job. Let's call it a CPD log. The CPD log is very much similar to an off-the-job log. So let's just call it CPD. Let's change the movement. Let's start now while we can. Any apprentice that's listening, any employer that's listening, any apprentice advisor, administrator, training provider that gets involved in apprenticeships, let's change the term. Off the job is not something I want to be hearing. I want to call it a CPD log. As we all know, part of our continual professional development means that we are continuously learning. And there are fun activities we can do and we can build into our CPD log. So we can sit in our CPD log and go, right, okay, well, there's things I want to learn, so we can put them down as actions to learn. And then there are extra things we do as we go through. So, for example, there are things like reading articles. You can put that in your CPD log. There are things like watching YouTube videos on how to do something or learn something. Put that in your CPD log. If there's a TV program that you've watched that's relevant to your role or your organisation or the industry, put it in your CPD log. If you attend a certain event or an exhibition, put it in your CPD log. If you attend a training session or teaching and learning session or workshop that's relating to your apprenticeship, put it in your CPD log. I want to start using the term CPD log because that's what it is. Now, you're just logging everything that you've learned and done. So even planning to do cross-departmental shadowing. Yes, departmental shadowing. Something that I don't see enough of within companies. And I think it's key that this gets brought back to the table. Especially for apprentices, because apprentices need to get the bigger picture of the organisation. And what better way to do it than spending some time in another department learning what they do. So you get the bigger picture. So, for example, you could say to an apprentice, okay, once a month you're going to spend half a day in HR, half a day in payroll, in finance, in health and safety, in the software team, in the marketing team, in the sales team, in the logistics department, in reservations, in corporate sales. So how many other departments you've got, if you do half a day, 4 hours, once a month, that helps with the CPD log. And everything else in between that individual learns or gains some knowledge or insights, they can put it down. And as a proactive manager who's got apprentices within their team should be saying to their apprentice, have you updated your CPD log? Or if they've done some training, they say, don't forget to update your CPD log, because they should. Be supportive. Show the apprentice that you care and that you are supporting in making sure they get their CPD logs updated. So just say to them, don't forget to log that as a CPD. Don't forget to put that in your CPD log. Now, an apprentice can have a written CPD log, i.e. handwritten, hiccups. Or they can have a typed CPD log, so they can go in and they can type it in. But either way, a CPD log is a CPD log. Because as a professional within L&D, and we should all be doing this as L&D practitioners, is keeping a minimum number of hours a year up to date with our CPD. So for example, in teaching and education, the minimum requirement is probably about 30 hours a year. 30 hours a year is not bad. But theoretically, you could set yourself a target and at least do 20 to 30 hours a month CPD. That's perfect because that shows your continuous growth, your continuous development, your continuous learning. And it's also good for people to get into the habit, because when you go to your bi-monthly or monthly probational reviews, or your 6 to 12 week review of your trainers or apprenticeship tutors, whether you have an internal review or performance review, the apprentices could be bringing their CPD log, or current employees could bring their CPD log to show what they've learned and done over the last period of time. And this is also, I've mentioned this in a couple of podcasts for Apprenticeship Week about the jar. Yes, the jar. And again, this is not something that is old hat. Well, it is something that's old hat. It's not something new. It's not a new trend or a fad. It's just a way to get yourself in the mood to remember things. So, for example, get yourself an empty jam jar or jar, and then, rinse it all off, get rid of the label, put a brand new sticky label on there that says apprenticeship achievements, or, my CPD log, or my CPD activities. And every time somebody does something, they can write it down on a post-it note, fold it up and stick it in the jar. And then when they go on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to update their CPD log, they can empty the jar, and in there will be everything that they've been up to. And all you really need to do is just put the title of what you did, what you kind of learnt from it, how long you spent on it, and how you use it within your job. Now, I will create a template for you to all probably access. If you want a CPD template, let me know. But there are lots of CPD templates out there. But I would say let's stop with this off the job It's nuts. It's crazy. It's causing too much stress and pressure for the apprentices. And if you actually listen to some apprentices, they get really stressed and frustrated with it. And I know I've got over 800 hours, for example, for my apprenticeship that needed to be completed. And I'm thinking, oh my God, 800 hours. Where am I going to find all of this? But actually, I do a lot of learning. I read a lot. I research a lot. I look at things. I find out different things from different departments. I learn certain new things. So from what I've learned, I pop it down, because every day we're learning something new. So at least in a week there should be at least 5 new things in your CPD jar, for example, that you can add to your CPD log. And then all that apprentice or individual's doing is taking 15-20 minutes out of their day or their week or their month just to pop in what they've done. Simple as. So as we as providers and employers sit there and moan about off the job, I think we need to take it back to basics, look at it at a different approach. Off the job in apprenticeships is basically a CPD log. That's all it is, guys. Nothing more. Yeah, you can do anything in your CPD. You can watch videos, read articles, do cross-training in different departments. You can, chat to the CEO about something. You can have a coach or mentoring session. You can do virtual e-learning. You could do a virtual training session. You've gone to an exhibition. You've gone to a trade show, whatever it may be. Add it to your CPD log, and then submit your CPD log to your tutors. That's how it should be. Because, for example, my ODM level 5, and the ODM level 5 apprenticeship is currently being revised and rewritten, and it will soon retire for something else because it's not fit for purpose. So it's slightly changing. Like most qualifications, after a period of time, they're no longer fit for purpose, so they retire and they will get replaced with a qualification that is similar but more relevant to industry or needed. So, for example, with my ODM, I have to produce a 900 hours off the job log and a CPD log. No, I'm not doing an off the job log. I'm doing a CPD log. And my aim is 30 hours of learning a month. And it will get there. And if at the end of my apprenticeship, for example, I'm missing a few hours, then there's things that I can do. And I go, okay, well, I'm supposed to have 900 hours. I've only got 840. I'm sure there's something else I've done, or there's something else I could do to finish that off. But if you naturally get into the habit of keeping a CPD log and updating it daily or weekly, is better than doing it monthly. So daily or weekly, update a CPD log. Just take 15 minutes out of your day, especially for apprentices. Get them to have 15 minutes out of their day to reflect on anything that they've learned that day and make a note of it. So if you are planned and organised, there could be activities you could put in your CPD log as planned activities to complete, and they can be reviewed. And as an apprentice, they can look at those and go, well, I wanted to go and cross-train in HR. Haven't done that yet. Let me speak to my manager. So you have that, and then you have your activities you completed. So, as I say, if you're organised and planned during the day, what I tend to do is at 5 o'clock, I tend to shut down for the day. Doesn't mean I turn everything off when I go home, or I turn everything off and I sit there eagerly clock watching until 5:30. No. What I do is at 5 o'clock I stop. Everything I do, I stop working. I finish whatever I'm doing by 5, and at 5 I take 10-15 minutes out just to reflect on, responding to any emails, sending anything else that needs to be done, planning for tomorrow, and then the other 10-15 minutes left of the day, I'm probably just popping some things in my CPD log. So what have I learned today? Anything new? Oh yeah, okay, I learned that. Oh yeah, I learned that. So I'll pop it in. And there's about 2 or 3 things that I've learned during the day that I've now added to my CPD log. And there you are. It's another 2 or 3 hours worth of learning added just for that day. And you'll start to realise how much of new things you learn every day, if it's even 1 or 2 hours. So it's a good thing. Now, most of this off-the-job rules says that it has to be done during working hours. It must be done. But actually, there's a slight caveat. And providers don't like you letting the apprentices know this. But the 6 hours off the job, if the apprentice is okay with it and is willing to do it, if they do some research on their apprenticeship, or they read something, or they watch something that's out of working hours, that can still be counted as off-the-job hours. So if you can only fit in 2 to 3 hours a week in the working week, and then the other 2 to 3 hours in the apprentice's time. Now, probably apprentices are sitting there going, oh God, but it's in my time. I don't be doing it in my time. Well, listen, there's time that we're travelling to and from work, right? You can. We have so many different devices. We have things on our phone. We have Kindles, we have Remarkables, we have all sorts of technology that we carry around with us. You can print something and take it home. You can sit and read it on the train. So, for example, if you've got a unit that you're looking at and you've got the assignment brief, or you've got some stuff you need to read, like some case studies and stuff, you could actually just print them off and take them home with you. You can sit on the train and read them, or on the bus and read them, because that 30-40 minutes while you're on the bus or waiting for a train, you're already doing some of your off-the-job learning. Record it on your CPD log. You've done research and you've learned something. So you can do it. And there's no harm of an apprentice doing some of these off-the-job hours outside of work. Because there's things that I will do. Something will pop in my mind, for example. Like if I want to know... So, for example, I am currently... I've just currently come back from the Netherlands. But I say I've come back from the Netherlands because this is Monday and the podcast goes out. But actually... I'm doing this while I'm in the Netherlands. So before flying out to the Netherlands to work with the Dutch team who are out here, there's a couple of things I wanted to know, and I wasn't very clear on things like Dutch health and safety, Dutch working regulations, or how the Dutch apprenticeship system worked. So I did a bit of research, and that was in my time. I sat having a coffee the weekend before I went, and I sat there on the Saturday thinking, I had a conversation with one of the guys in the Dutch team. We just had a general chit chat about kind of what's going on, what needs to be done, and then it got my brain ticking. Actually, what's that? What's the health and safety rules under COSH, and what's the requirement of right to works and training requirements in the Netherlands? Is it similar to us? So I did a little bit of research on the Saturday and a little bit of research on the Sunday. While I was just chilled, relaxing, having a cup of coffee, it was in my mind. I wanted to have a look, and I did some research. Turned out I probably spent about 4 to 5 hours researching some information that I needed to know before going. Well, you know what? That's 5 hours of CPD log. Researching employment rules and regulations in the Netherlands. Researching health and safety requirements for employers and employees' rights and responsibilities in the Netherlands. Apprenticeship structure and frameworks within the Netherlands, and further education and vocational training within the Netherlands. Funding rules within the Netherlands. So there's about 5 hours worth of initial research and learning that could go as your CPD. Easy as that. Even if you read an article about something, there we are, you learned something new. And the idea of a CPD log, some people get panicky over it, some people worry about it, but the thing to ask is, from the activity you've just done, did you gain or learn anything from it? If yes, write it down. Bing, light bulb, ding, ding. That's your CPD. Easy as that. So this is where it grinds my gears, and I love having these conversations, and I love being open about this. But please, providers, stop pushing off the job. Stop saying it's off the job. It's a CPD log. Change the wording. If you change the wording, you change the mindset. You change the mindset, you get productivity. We all talk about the pathway of limitation and the pathway of possibility in the realm of strengths. What we focus on, our performance, kind of our outcome, the results, and we're always in between the pathway of responsibility and the pathway of possibilities. And we have to change our mindset in that. And I think if you change the mindset and the approach of this off the job, my God, it will be better. It will be achieved. It will be done. There will be no bitches and moans and rumbles and grumbles and employers saying, no, this is not going to work, we can't do this, we can't deliver apprenticeships if this is a requirement, we're never going to do apprenticeships, they lose their funding, apprentices dropping out because it's too much this off the job hours. Let's change it. Let's change the wording, and let's change the landscape. For an apprentice, they must complete at least 24 hours of CPD a month. At least. There are times where you're not going to complete a full 6 hours in the week. You might do only 2 or 3 hours, but in other weeks you might do a little bit more. Some weeks you do a little bit less, but it all will kind of balance out. So change the wording, guys. It's a CPD log. If you're an apprentice and you're listening to this, just create a CPD log and register and log everything you learn. As I said, the key top tip to this is, if you do something, did you learn something from it? If yes, make a note of it. Write it on that post-it note and stick it in your apprenticeship jar. Yeah? then go back and look at it and add it to your CPD log. Have a paper version of your CPD log and write anything you learn. Yeah. Have some notes on your phone, like on the phone you can have notepads and OneNote. Go in there and make a note of what you've learned. Yeah. So it could be anything new and interesting you've learned to do with kind of work or learning or something. So I attend a lot of webinars, and there's quite a few things that I learn in webinars. I'll log it on my CPD. There's a few articles I've read. So there was one article about the right to work changes and checks, but also how immigration had recently been involved in visiting a hotel and the outcome and what happened. And I found out that the funding, or the fine that you would normally get has tripled. So it's not 20,000, it's now 60,000. And there's a couple of extra things that I read from that article I didn't know. Hey, I added it to my CP log because I learned something. The same as if you're listening to TV, radio. If you learn something on TikTok, you learn something on, I don't know, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you have learned about something that is work related or could be used within your industry, make a note of it. So for example, for my podcast, I do lots of research on some interesting topics relating to apprenticeships, HR, employment law, ESG, L&D, all sorts of things. And when I do my research, that counts as my CPD. So CPD logs are better than off-the-job logs. So let's change that landscape, everybody. As I said, change the landscape, change the approach, change the mindset. If you change the mindset, you get more done and you'll get a full, better, productive log. So as we approach the end of this podcast, I hope that you found it useful and a little bit of an insight to how I see off the job. And I think, look, if anybody wants to pick up this conversation either on a podcast or offline, or post your comments in the boxes below, or reach out to me either at pete@creativemind.zone or drop into my DMs on LinkedIn. But I think we need to have a different approach. We should be having CPD logs. Everybody should have a CPD log, regardless. Anybody in any organisation should keep one. And we should, as part of the L&D and HR function, be promoting not the off the job, but the I nearly said it then, promoting the CPD log, and say, guys, you're going to have to create a CPD log. We'll give you a template, and then when doing an activity or a training course or anything you do, if you feel at the end of the day that you've learned something, log it on your CPD, so it helps you when you go to your reviews, when you go into meetings with your manager about performance. You can go in there and say, great, because as we all know, in part of the lovely world of HR, and I say this to everybody, you're in the driving seat of your own career, your own progression, your own qualifications. So when you sit there with your boss and your boss says to you in your review, so let's look at your your CPD or your development plan. Let's have a look at that. So you said you were going to shadow HR, finance, you were going to shadow payroll, or you wanted to shadow the operations team. Have you done that yet? And the employee goes, no. Why? I've been waiting for you. You're supposed to tell me when I can do that. No. You need to tell me. No. You're my boss. You tell me. You've not helped me develop. You're holding me back. And the employer's going to be, I'm not holding you back. You're holding yourself back. And I believe this, a CPD log or a development plan, which could be rolled into one, is your own live, living and breathing document. It is alive. And I always tell this to people, your CPD log and your development plan is a living and breathing document. If you go and have those conversations like I've just had between myself and my manager, you'll find that you're saying to your manager, yeah, but you're responsible for my development, right? You're supposed to be telling me when I can do these things. It's your responsibility as the employer, right? No. As the employee, it's your responsibility. If you want to grow and develop in this organisation, you need to take the forward step. You put it in your plan, you need to come and tell me when you want to do it, and we'll book it in. You go and do it, you tick it off your CPD. That's how it should be. Throw it back. As an employer, we need to push that responsibility back to the individual. If they want to grow and develop, happy days. If they don't, then that's their own problem. But what I will say is, everyone's in the driving seat of their own careers and their own personal development logs. So if you want to build a CPD culture within your organization, embed it right from day one. And get your managers to embrace it, your HR teams, your L&D teams, get your CEOs, your operations team, the COOs, the COFs, whoever they are, they should be doing it as well. You might have a little fun competition of like who's achieved 30 hours of CPD this month. Or if you achieve, your 30 hours CPD continuously for 3 months, then you get a prize, or you get so much towards a qualification or a course that you could do. So for example, you might say, well, if you do your CPD and you keep your CPD log up to date and you record 30 hours continuously over the next 6 months, then we will give you £500 towards any course you want to do. Or if you keep your CPD log up to date for the whole 6 months, what we'll do is we will pay for any course that you want to do. Any course. We'll support you, and we'll support you in development. But also, what you can do is just support them in general. So it should be, but make sure that the learning is in that side of their development is what they do as an individual, not you pushing them as an employer. So I have kind of gone on off topic slightly, and I've stayed on topic quite a lot, but this was about off the job. And to summarise, abolish the title off the job. Abolish the, requirement that you must complete this off the job 6 hours. Let's change it. Let's change that mindset. Let's shake it up. From today, I'm calling upon all training providers, apprenticeship tutors, apprentices, and employers to re-look at the approach of the off the job. Approach it as a CPD log. Create some awareness around how to create and update a CPD log. Remember to focus on telling individuals that at the end of the day, to reflect what they've learned from today. And if out of any of the activities they have learned something that is going to help them within their role, or they learned something completely different that they didn't even know about the company or the organisation, or they learned something different about the industry, log it. So at least at the end of every day, they'll have 1 or 2 activities to register that they've done. Okay? And please just make sure that you are getting them to log the date, what the activity was, how long the activity was, and what they learned, and how they would use it or make note of it within their roles. So if and then they can share that with their tutors on a monthly or 12-weekly basis, and that will do it. But I am adamant that if we changed the landscape and the approach to how off the job works and change it to just a CPD log, we would get more people's buy-in on off the job. And as I said, a CPD log covers everything from things you learn, watch, read, hear, shadow training, whatever it may be. So for example, spending the time out here in the Netherlands has been fantastic because I've seen how the Dutch team do it, and it's given me a lot of insight. So that's 8 hours a day I've been with the Dutch team. So that's about a 40-hour week of learning some interesting way in how the Dutch operate in the working world, and especially in my sector. So that 40 hours done for the month. Hey, February sorted, bonus. But that will go down in my CPD because as a professional, I'm learning something. And it's good because if you keep a CPD log, and this should be embedded in apprenticeships anyway, CPD log, and it should continue because as you develop and grow through your career, employers are going to ask you, how do you keep up to date with industry knowledge, skills, the knowledge skills behaviours element within your industry. And if you can show, well, actually, I have a continuous professional development log, a CPD log, and every day I will reflect on anything new I've learned and I'll make note of it. So I've got a track of everything I've learned and gained over the time in my career. Friggin' fantastic. Because that shows that you are keen and willing to learn, and that you are keeping track of your own development. So remember, change the mindset, change the approach, and change the bloody title of off the job to CPD logs. That's all I'm asking. So I might lobby government with that and create a petition, and let's see if it gets accepted. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a petition on the Parliament website to change CPD, or change off the job to CPD, and set a new requirement for it. And that should be within the realms that they can do. So I'm going to send it to 10 people. If I send it to you, please sign it for me, and then for it to open publicly and see what they say. But yes, let's change the landscape. So as I say, any providers or employer providers out there that want to pick this conversation up and explore it a little bit more with me, I would love that. But as I said, calling all apprentices, if you're currently doing off the job learning, different mindset, guys. It's called a CPD log. Log everything that you learn day to day. The last half hour of the day, take at least 15 minutes out to reflect and make a note of anything that you've learned new that day. That will build your CPD log, or your, in brackets, off the job, that you can show and give to your tutor. But also remember, if you have a printed copy next to you on your desk, you can make a note and write it in, not a problem, and you can type it up at a later date. Or you can scan and share that with your tutor, and that's still good enough. But also remember the jar scenario. Put an empty jar on your desk with achievements or what I've learned, and then anything new you learn, write it on the post-it note, pop it in the jar, and then when it's time to update your CPD log, empty that jar, and there are your golden nuggets. So hopefully this episode has helped you out understand what off the job is a little bit more, and a really different take and twist on off the job. So please, moving forward today, if you have off the job, change your mindset. It's actually a CPD log, guys, nothing else. So if your tutor says, oh, do you have your off the job? Oh, you mean my CPD log? Yeah, I've got one. No, you're off the job. Yeah, my CPD is my off the job. It's got everything I've been learning and doing all there. Oh, okay. Because I know when you submit your apprenticeship, they're going to ask you if you're off the job and your CPD log. Well, it's the 2-in-1, to be honest. So let's stop overcomplicating this, people, especially in the DFE, SFA, IFA. Stop overcomplicating it. Let's make it plain and simple for these guys. As a professional, we should be keeping CPDs anyway, to show that we are up to date with industry standards, knowledge, and our own skill set. So let's just call it CPD. Be done with it. Have a set minimum requirement monthly, which could be 24 hours of CPD a month. Perfect. That's all I ask. Yeah. So as I say, I hope you found this episode of some use. If you want to share it with anybody, then please feel free, share it with people that you may think benefit from listening to this. Again, if you want to get involved in having this conversation a little bit more and explore it a little bit more, and get involved in the debate about off the job hours, then please reach out to me via popping into my DMs on LinkedIn, or emailing pete@creativemind.zone, or popping your name in the comments below wherever you saw this post, and then I will reach out to you so we can have those conversations, get you going. But remember, you can always go back and listen to previous episodes of this podcast and any of the other podcast episodes, especially in season 1 and 2, by going to Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon, Google Music, and RSS.com, even YouTube. If you search Say As It Is with Pete, you'll be able to find my podcast channel in there. But yes, if you have anything you want to any topics you want to hear about as well, just reach out and let me know, and we can have those conversations. But again, guys, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic week, and I will catch you on the next episode of Say As It Is with Pete.